Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
It's not just inflation that could push grocery bills even higher. Good evening, I'm Maya Trabulsi. That is among the issues being raised by the California Attorney General and grocery store unions over Albertsons' proposed merger with Kroger. KPBS reporter Kitty Alvarado spoke to shoppers who have the same concerns about the deal.
Customers who have been facing higher prices for months are worried about what the proposed Albertsons and Kroger merger will do to their bottom line. The two chains own 5,000 stores between them.
And that's disconcerting to me, because anytime you have someone who has that much of a market share, where's the competition? And for, I think, grocery stores or for any store to be beneficial to their customers, there has to be competition.
How much more are we going to be paying? Everything's already high, so I'm concerned about it, because then where else will we go? We really won't have an option, because if they're all merged together, we're paying the same price. There's no competition.
Albertsons and Kroger also have 700,000 employees across the U.S. In San Diego County, those workers are represented by UFCW Local 135, which is calling on regulators to stop the merger, and a planned $4 billion dividend payout by Albertsons to stockholders. In a statement, the union says they want Albertsons to invest this $4 billion in workers and lower prices for families. They ask, quote, why should shareholders be rewarded for the hard work by union members like you? Mike Ryan has been a member of Local 135 for 34 years. He says he's seen this before, and it's not good.
But the first thing that you think of when you talk about a company coming in to purchase our company is store closures.
Ryan says workers have sacrificed a lot in the past couple of years working through a pandemic, including losing some of their own. He's asking that those making the decisions carefully consider their employees and customers.
You have a lot of people who have worked really, really hard over these years to help you profit off of our sacrifice. I would highly recommend that you take that in consideration before you make any deals that could sacrifice jobs, especially these people who work so hard during a pandemic.
Grocery store union leaders are in Chicago to talk about the proposed merger and payout. And they're not the only ones calling out the grocery store giants. California Attorney General Rob Bonta is among 6 attorneys general who sent out a letter to Albertsons demanding they delay their payout until the Federal Trade Commission and they review the merger and payout. We reached out to Albertsons and Kroger for comment. We have not received a reply. Kitty Alvarado, KPBS News.
A new economic report out now showing a silver lining, all as Americans battle record high inflation, skyrocketing mortgage rates, plus the Fed is expected to announce yet another rate hike next month. Isabel Rosales breaks down what it all means for consumers.
A sign of hope for economic recovery. The latest data shows the gross domestic product grew 2.6%. It's a turnaround from the negative of 1.6% in the first quarter and negative 0.6% in the second.
Great economic report today.
The report by the Bureau of Economic Analysis offering a sign of relief for the White House as President Joe Biden looks to tout economic successes heading into the midterms.
And when you combine this with reports that we've seen recently in the labor market, this does show that the economy continues to move forward.
More spending in travel and dining out, balanced with less spending in durable goods, fueling the economic growth. But experts warn Americans should still brace for a recession.
I think the odds that next year we get a recession are very high because inflation's still high, the Federal Reserve's still fighting inflation, and also the whole world is going into recession.
Other factors of concern to consumers include a housing market cool down as mortgage rates top 7% for the first time since 2002, all coming on the heels of interest rates on the rise as the Fed works to cool white-hot inflation.
That doesn't feel great always. You know, we see rising interest rates for mortgages, as you say, all kinds of debt. At the same time, this is necessary in order to avoid a hard landing.
In Washington, Isabel Rosales, KPBS News.
Neighbors in Barrio Logan have been complaining about a strong odor coming from a biofuel company for nearly a year. Now the San Diego County air pollution officials are ordering that the company do something about it. But as KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson explains, the fix is still weeks away.
Regulators are asking Barrio Logan residents to wait a bit longer.
I'm asking for a little bit of patience and a little bit of time. And respectfully, I'm committed to them. We are committed to them to ensure that we actually come to a sustainable solution.
New Leaf Biofuel is getting until December 9th to fix an odor problem that neighbors have been complaining about since last November. The smell comes from used cooking oil that the Barrio Logan company turns into diesel fuel. Founder Jennifer Case says that fuel is much more environmentally friendly than the fossil fuel it replaces. She says the company is also committed to finding a solution to the odor problem.
New Leaf fully supports the entry of the stipulated order of abatement. We developed this in negotiations with ABCD staff over the summer to address the odor.
The company has already bought activated carbon filters and is waiting for an industrial fan that will create negative pressure inside a production building.
I live, like I say, directly across from this place, which puts me directly in the intensity zone.
Peter Colon says the pungent smell is there all the time, but worst in the morning and evening.
I normally do a lot of gardening out in the yard. I haven't been able to do that this year, nor as much last year, because of the odor. When I get up in the morning, I look at my air monitor, and outside it says it's polluted every morning.
Some residents say the smell was so strong during a 2-week-long heat wave this past summer that residents stayed inside their apartments without air conditioning. Regulators will meet again next month to check on the company's progress. The fan and filters have to be operating by December 9th. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
As San Diegans adjust to living with COVID-19 long-term, so are city officials. Today was the final meeting of San Diego's COVID Response and Recovery Committee. KPBS health reporter Matt Hoffman explains.
Since early last year, the San Diego City Council's COVID-19 Response and Recovery Committee has been meeting about all things pandemic.
We did our very best to make sure that our communities of concern were taken care of, were prioritized. I think we can look back at this and say we have still some more time to go.
Thursday was their final meeting. Councilmember Marnie Von Wilpert leads the committee. She says they've helped oversee $500 million in federal relief money, some of which was used for rent relief and to pay first responders. Von Wilpert also highlighted the work of city staff who helped deliver COVID vaccines and testing. Staffing was a challenge at times. She says some departments had up to 50% of staff out sick.
So for all of our residents who called in and said, why am I not getting the services I need? Because our workers were hit just as hard by the pandemic as the community was, and yet we still persevered.
Von Wilpert says the committee helped the city navigate through ever-changing restrictions and health orders with the goal of giving the community the best information possible.
Let us never forget this lesson. We must work together. We must put politics aside. We must use intelligence and data, and we must solve problems before they spread.
Moving forward, the city has a new public health coordinator. Officials say they want to be proactive instead of reactive like during early parts of the pandemic.
The triple-demic is what we are concerned about.
The county health department's Dr. Jennifer Tudor has been briefing the council committee. Tudor says she is concerned about early increases in flu and RSV cases, and she is anticipating some type of a winter COVID surge. She says the Omicron subvariant BA.5 is still the dominant strain here, with vaccines and treatments still working well.
This bivalent booster, what's called the updated booster, is really something giving us extra protection while we are still in this Omicron phase of variants.
The city still has about $150 million in COVID relief money, about 2/3 of which is planning to be spent next year. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
County health officials are reporting the first flu death of the season. A 55-year-old man from the north central region of the county died earlier this month. He had underlying medical conditions and had not been vaccinated against the flu. He also tested negative for COVID. It comes as hospitals here and across the country are dealing with 3 respiratory illnesses at once. Ivan Rodriguez reports.
RSV, or respiratory syncytial virus, is a common illness that is occasionally severe in young children and one doctors are used to treating. But this year, children's hospitals across the country are seeing an unexpected rise in cases and hospitalizations.
We saw RSV starting to circulate in the summer, and we had a very, very early peak.
In these 5 states, pediatric hospital beds are almost at capacity, with Rhode Island reaching 99%. Dr. Andy Shane with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta says, along with the rise in RSV cases, the flu is also a growing concern.
We definitely are starting to see many, many more cases of influenza in children with flu. Among the children that we've been seeing with COVID and influenza that are requiring hospitalization, 95% have not been fully vaccinated.
The CDC says flu positivity rates increased at the beginning of October from 2.8% to more than 4% in just 1 week, a rate experts say is higher than usual for this time of year. And of course, there is still concern over COVID-19. While those cases remain relatively low, doctors worry about how much of an impact all 3 of these respiratory illnesses will have this season.
The question is, how severe will it be? We've already started seeing cases, and we're not even in winter yet. So that's why it's really important to get that influenza shot.
Ivan Rodriguez, KPBS News.
The flu shot is available at doctors' offices and pharmacies and is covered by insurance. People with no health care coverage can get vaccinated for free at the county's 6 public health centers. And to find one near you, you can visit sandiegocounty.gov or call 211. It's been just over a year since a teenager alleged that she was raped by San Diego State University football players at a party off campus. To date, no criminal charges have been filed, and SDSU says its own investigation is still ongoing. KPBS reporter Alexander Wynn says at the same time, a team of outside auditors is examining how the university conducts these investigations.
Quantum physics has always intrigued me.
Last year, Jordan Rosenquist was just another freshman on SDSU's campus. Then, September 8th happened.
I was sexually assaulted in a SDSU dorm hall.
She immediately reported the alleged assault to the university's Title IX office, which is in charge of investigating allegations of sexual violence on campus. But instead of being helped, she says she felt pushback.
I did not feel supported by the SDSU Title IX office at all. I felt like I was more working against them than they were working with me.
She says the university did not immediately inform her of her rights as a sexual assault victim. She had to hire a lawyer for that. That was not what's supposed to happen under Title IX, says attorney Jenna Rangel.
When the school receives any report of sexual harassment or assault, they do have a duty to promptly respond and provide information about what their grievance process is, their investigative process, and then what supportive measures they might have available.
Rangel is currently representing the women's rowing team, who are suing SDSU for Title IX violation in sports, but is not a party to this case.
SDSU isn't the only campus in the California State University system with issues surrounding Title IX. In fact, the CSU Board of Trustees ordered a system-wide audit of the Title IX process at all 23 campuses.
The audit started in March at Fresno State, and auditors will be on SDSU campus in November. Rangel expects auditors to thoroughly examine how SDSU Title IX office handles complaints.
I think they are going to be looking at all instances in which complaints were made, how those complaints were made, meaning do they have effective policies and procedures in place and notices in place to where the people who complained were able to find that information easily.
Rosenquist says the university needs to do a much better job of making victims feel protected. She talks about living in fear of her alleged attacker, even after getting a restraining order against him.
I felt so much anxiety every single day when I was on campus because I even brought the restraining order to the San Diego State Police Department and officials on campus. I gave a copy to Title IX, and he actually violated that restraining order, and I reported it, and they did nothing about it.
Rosenquist says SDSU Title IX office told her they waited to investigate her allegation because it's policy to wait until after the police investigation is over. In a statement to KPBS, SDSU says no such policy is in place. But this was the same reason SDSU gave for not starting its investigation into the rape allegation against 3 football players at a Halloween party off campus last year. That incident happened roughly a month after Rosenquist's alleged assault.
That hit a chord with me because I really felt for that person, because although our incidents were not the same, I knew what they were going through.
The university says it was asked by police not to start its own investigation because doing so might taint the criminal investigation. This is not the first time there has been a Title IX audit at SDSU. In 2014, an audit found that SDSU faculty and staff were not sufficiently trained in responding to and reporting sexual assaults and harassment. The report also faulted SDSU for not requiring students to undergo yearly sexual assault and harassment prevention training. Since then, the university has mandated the training for all student and staff. Rosenquist hopes the new audit will lead to much-needed changes to the Title IX office at San Diego State.
They really need to push for protecting their students and protecting their survivors that have gone through this, rather than just kind of being passive in the process.
Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
Governor Gavin Newsom took an uncommon step today when he publicly endorsed a local proposition. It was Measure D, which would allow the city of San Diego to require project labor agreements for city-funded construction projects. KPBS reporter Thomas Fudge has more on the labor-friendly Measure D and the arguments for and against it.
Governor Newsom's press release said Measure D would guarantee that San Diego would continue to, quote, receive its fair share of vital infrastructure funding. Project labor agreements called PLAs require building contractors to enter into a work agreement with a union or other employee group. 10 years ago, San Diego voters approved a measure to ban PLAs from city-funded construction projects. Approval of Measure D next month would overturn that city law. Carol Kim supports Measure D.
This is actually very simple. The simple thing is that it's about making sure that city law is clearly and definitively in alignment with state requirements, and that we are allowed to get our fair share, period.
Project labor agreements are politically controversial, favored by labor and opposed by free market conservatives. But labor-backed supporters of the measure also say San Diego risks losing state construction money because a state law says if a charter city prohibits consideration of a PLA, then state funding or financial assistance shall not be used to support that project. The state law was passed at about the same time San Diego voters banned the use of PLAs for city construction projects. How much state money has been denied San Diego due to its law? The answer is none. Abdul Rahim Hamid, president of the National Black Contractors Association, says the argument for Measure D is an empty threat.
It's the Democratic Party, who's been funded by labor PAC money, who's in Sacramento, telling the Democrats locally, just tell them that we're going to not fund you and use fear taxes and scaremongering to push the voters into supporting a measure of exclusion.
Hamid and other opponents of Measure D point out that there is an exception to the ban on PLAs when state funding is at risk. The proposition voters passed says the city can ban PLAs on city projects except when a PLA is required by state or federal law as a condition of receiving state and federal funds.
The reality of it is that San Diego has never been denied funding because it doesn't have state union project labor agreements.
None of the supporters of Measure D claim that San Diego has lost money because it bans project labor agreements. And Carol Kim can't give an example of a state official openly saying the city's position on PLAs has caused it to lose money. But she believes the state would take a more generous financial view of San Diego if it allowed project labor agreements for city projects.
We pay a lot of taxes to the state, and that money does not come back here in the way it should, perhaps, because that money gets allocated or prioritized to other parts of the state where there are policies that make state funding agencies more comfortable.
If San Diego voters allow PLAs to be required for city projects, you can expect to see a lot of them. The San Diego City Council, not the voters, chose to put Measure D on the November ballot. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
The city of San Diego is officially supporting Proposition 1. Today, Mayor Todd Gloria signed the resolution passed by the city council earlier this month. The statewide ballot measure would enshrine the right to reproductive freedom in the California Constitution, and that includes the right to choose to have an abortion as well as the right to choose or refuse contraceptives. In another ballot measure, California voters will be asked to invest in the arts in our schools. Prop 28 would require the state to set aside a share of its revenue for arts and education classes. Cal Matters reporter Joe Hong explains.
When school budgets are cut, art and music classes are often the first to go. But a coalition of educators, labor groups, musicians, and Hollywood actors say arts and music are just as important as science, math, and reading. In November, California voters will decide if the state's yearly budget should mandate about $1 billion more for arts and music education.
Hi, I'm Joe Hong. I'm the K-12 education reporter for Cal Matters, and this is Proposition 28 in a minute.
Today, the state requires all of California's public school students to get some form of art instruction. But the quality of education can vary based on where you live. So Prop 28 was designed to give more money to districts that serve more students living in poverty. This measure won't raise taxes, but it will affect the budget. By law, California guarantees that about 40% of the state's general fund goes to education. Prop 28 would add 1% to that and dedicate it to arts instruction. For next year, that comes out to about an additional $1 billion. Districts would need to use most of that money to hire teachers for art, music, or drama. Supporters of the measure say students need the space to express themselves now more than ever to overcome the mental health challenges brought on by the pandemic. The money would come out of the state's general fund, which currently has a surplus of nearly $100 billion. So for now, supporters say they don't anticipate any cuts from elsewhere in the state budget. Heading into the fall campaign, no individual or organization was spending money to oppose the measure. So vote yes if you want California to give more money to schools for art and music, and vote no if you don't.
To learn more about this proposition and others, visit calmatters.org.
And you can find more election coverage at kpbs.org. The KPBS Voter Hub is where you'll find stories that explain the key races and an in-depth ballot guide. And you can get there by clicking the link on our homepage. Cannabis licensing could soon move from the Sheriff's Department to the Planning Department. The San Diego County Board of Supervisors approved a first reading of the ordinance yesterday. If passed, it will allow planning and development services to conduct background checks, inspections, issue operating certificates, and process licenses. Chairman Nathan Fletcher says this will free up deputies to crack down on illegal cannabis operations.
The weather pattern to close out this week and begin the weekend, the final weekend of October, it looks rather quiet and rather comfortable for this time of the year. In fact, the cool pattern that's been around the last few days, that continues for a couple more, then a more seasonable air mass moves in by the time we get into early next week. We'll have dry, light offshore winds, not enough to really up the fire risk, but it will be enough to keep any clouds, even to the coastal sections, away from the region. All in all, this sets us up for an awesome autumn weekend, the final weekend of the month of October. Overnight tonight, temperatures dropping into the upper 50s in the metro with a partly cloudy sky. Region-wide, if anything, that's the warmest location. We've got widespread 40s once you get away from San Diego proper. El Cajon, low to mid 50s, but Ramona 47, Mount Laguna 42, even Borrego Springs dropping down into the upper 40s. For your Friday, we'll remain tranquil, seasonably comfortable, we'll call it, for this time of the year. No real weather worries region-wide. As far as the weather is concerned, a lot of sunshine will be around. I mentioned those offshore winds. You'll notice even to the coast, we're not really getting that onshore more push of marine air, so we don't really even have any low clouds in the forecast region-wide. So it will be a very bright way to end this work week. Lots of sunshine, temperatures generally in the 70s, although Borrego Springs, you'll probably make it to 80 degrees for the day on Friday. Into the weekend, not much changes. High pressure remains in control of our weather. It will be very pleasant. Temperatures will be inching back closer to seasonable levels. So at the coast, it's mid-70s through Monday. Then temperatures get knocked back to around 70 by Tuesday. Inland, lots of sunshine, temperatures warming up to the low 80s for Sunday and Monday, and then not as warm by Tuesday, but we'll keep the sun around. In the mountains, temperatures will be in the low to mid 60s before getting knocked back to 58 by Tuesday. Once again sunny. And in the deserts, it's generally in the 80s right through the period. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Ben Reppert.
It's a call to San Diegans to come up with a fun and creative name for one of the city's newest tech. The new 100% electric mini street sweeper. It needs a name, and suggestions are being collected on social media. And you can also email thinkblue@sandiego.gov if you have some ideas. It's part of a public outreach and education initiative to prevent pollution ending up in our local waterways and the ocean. If you have an idea for a name, you have until November 10th to make your suggestion, and then residents will vote on the top 3 names. So get those ideas in. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following: by viewers like you. Thank you.